Wind down. Hey, hey. Please wind down. Hey, hey. Me and my girls just want to die down. That's why we can see each other's ground. Please wind down. Hey, hey. Me and my girl want to die down. And that's why we can see each other's ground. Please wind down. Hey, hey. Me and my girls just want to die down. That's why we can see each other's ground. Please wind down. Hey, hey. Me and my girls just want to die down. That's why we can see each other's ground. Please wind down. What's up, everybody, and welcome to the Queen's Wind Down. I am your leading lady, Tyra Hill, and I will be leading the conversation on tonight's show. I am so excited to have this conversation. It is a long and overdue conversation dealing with the Black community. Tonight on the Queen's Wind Down, we're talking mental health, state of the Black community. It's a lot going on, you guys, and I could not do this conversation without two dope African-American professionals. And I'm going to introduce the guests for the evening, my co-hosts for the evening. But before I do, let me welcome you, if this is your first time tuning in to anything that I've done, any of my shows. You are set for a real conversation, because if you're dealing with it, we're talking about it, a transparent conversation, a raw and real conversation. Welcome to all of my first-time viewers. And please do us a favor and connect with us on social media, on all of our social media outlets. The second thing I want to say is, yes, the show entitled is The Queen's Wind Down, and I will be winding down over a cocktail or a mocktail. You never know what I'm winding down over. Cocktail or a mocktail. However, please, no drinking and no driving. Be responsible. Friends don't let friends do stupid stuff, right? If you are coming back because you love the Queen's Wind Down, I say welcome back, welcome back, welcome back. Guys, it's about to go down. We're about to have a real conversation. The show usually lasts an hour, but tonight we might go a little bit over because this is about to be a dope show. My first guest co-host on this evening is Queen Tracy Harris, who is a licensed social worker who obtained her undergraduate degree in social work, BSW, from Coppin State University, and her master's degree in social work, MSW, from Morgan State University. She currently holds a license as a LMSW, a licensed master social worker. Ms. Harris has worked in the profession of social work for 17 years. Ms. Harris has worked with many different populations. She has worked with individuals with co-occurring disorders, individuals suffering from multiple sclerosis and mental health issues, domestic violence and trauma victims, in-home care and hospice, children with autism, individuals that were in the criminal justice system, and helping children, teens, and adults cope with grief due to significant and traumatic losses. Ladies and gentlemen, I welcome you, my first guest co-host, Miss Tracy Harris.
Hello.
Tracy.
Hello.
Hi, Queen.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Oh, Tracy, you know I couldn't have it any other way. Thank you for saying yes. You know how I feel about mental health.
Yes.
And how our community is suffering. So I'm excited to have this dope conversation.
Yes, it will be a great conversation that is greatly needed. So I'm excited about this.
You excited?
Yes, I am.
All right, Coppin and Morgan State, you represent D-More, huh?
Most definitely.
Well, I'm excited to get into it with you. Our second guest co-host, Oh my goodness. I'm excited about both of my guests, but it's always dope to bring a king to the conversation. I know you guys says the show, it's the Queen's Wind Down, but every once in a while, I'm going to add a dope king to the conversation, right? So our next guest co-host for tonight is a king. Dr. DaMond Holt currently works for Metropolitan State University of Denver Western Educational Equity Assistance Center, better known as WEEAC, as a trauma expert, and for Tucson Unified School District as the bullying prevention expert. Dr. Holt is a certified traumatologist and a certified mental health specialist, bullying prevention specialist, trauma crisis specialist through the American School Counselors Association. His work and research are an asset-based approach to trauma. His work in the deficient-based approach, which focuses on how chronic stress, complex trauma, PTSD, and long-term grief can have neurological effects and can impair brain development in children. Dr. Holt is the host of Higher Ground Show with Dr. Holt Podcast, a show that discusses trauma, mental health, and social justice. He is also the founder of the Lemons to Lemonade Project, LLC, a business that does research, training, and support in the areas of psychological trauma, restorative practice and justice, bullying prevention, diversity, equality, and social emotional learning. Ladies and gentlemen, queens and kings, I welcome none other than my brother and my friend, Dr. DaMond Holt. King!
Hey!
Hey! How are you?
Oh, I'm ready to take over the world.
Oh, I see you. I see you. Let me see what your shirt says.
Black dads are dope.
Oh, most deaf. 2 words, most deaf. I love that shirt. Welcome. I am so excited to have both you, Queen, and King, to be my guest co-host on tonight. This conversation is needed. I am excited about it. I am ready for it to be unfiltered, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right? I am ready for it to be raw, real, and transparent. And I really, really want to meet the people where they are, right? So y'all ready to get into it?
Yep.
All right. Let's talk trauma. Trauma is defined as a deep, distressing, or disturbing experience, an emotional shock, a physical injury. Would it be fair, Tracy, to say that we've all, especially the African American community, have suffered from some form of trauma?
I think that would be fair to say. I think that it's also would be fair to say that trauma isn't something always that has to happen to us directly, meaning that it has to happen to me. It's also something that I can witness. So I could have witnessed something that could be very traumatic for me. So I would say that within the Black community, that yes, most, if not all, people in the Black community has experienced some type of trauma in their lifetime.
And so when we talk about trauma, because I'm not a professional, that's why I pulled you guys in, right? Because I want to talk facts and I want to be real. When we talk trauma, Tracy, and then Dr. Holt, I'm going to come to you. I need for you to add on to the list. What are we saying? What are we describing as trauma? Things like having addiction parents?
Yeah. Addiction, grief, addiction, losses such as if we look at grief and loss, when we look at losses that are traumatic, it can be the death of someone. It can be so for us, it's anything that's significant that matters to you. So the death of loss with someone, the loss of a house, the loss of a family, for children that are taken away from their families and put into the foster care system, that can be very traumatic. Car accidents can be traumatic. I mean, the list of trauma, it's big, and I can't say that what is traumatic to someone isn't what is maybe not traumatic to one person can be traumatic to someone else.
Not right there, because Dr. Holt, I'm gonna tag you in, but that's such a dope point, Tracy, because right now in this season, we're seeing our sons, our daughters, our husbands, our fathers, our brothers, our sisters being slaughtered in the streets by police officers, right? And so for the African American community, that's traumatic for us. And one of the reasons why it's traumatic is because we keep seeing it over and over and over again.
Right.
Like it's like every other day or at least once a week, right? So every time I have to look at a Breonna Taylor or George Floyd or Trayvon Martin, that is traumatic for me as a Black person. So when you said, and Dr. Holt, I want you to chime in right here, when you said one thing that may be traumatic for me may not be traumatic for the next person, that would be true. And this is why I call it cultural trauma. Because as a culture, we're experiencing some trauma that white folks ain't experiencing. Dr. Holt, can you chime in on that?
Oh, sure. Thank you for having me. So as a traumatologist, most of my research is dealing with the neuroscience piece of it. And I think this is awesome to put a clinician and a neuroscience expert together, because I talk about more on what is exactly going on in the brain. So let me go back to the definition. So as a traumatologist, we defined trauma to be two major things. One, it is an injury. It is an emotional, mental wound or scar to the brain, and it is a chronic stress. And what I mean by chronic stress is any life-altering, life-devastating event that takes place. And I don't like to use the word trauma victim. I like to say trauma survivor, because I'm is that any life-altering devastation that has happened to a person's life, it has most definitely impacted the brain on a neuroscience level. And then there's a neurobiological effect that puts individuals into what we would call a fight, flight, or freeze, or an activation of the sympathetic nervous system that makes you dissociative, hypervigilant, make you on high alert all the time. And so we talk about a lot of those things. And so you're right that, and then when we look at trauma impacts the brain in such a way, either you experience it, or you have witnessed, or you have heard atrocious, horrific stories of others that have went through those same trauma. The whole point of the matter is that violence and life devastating situations still impacts the brain. And so whether you can experience it, or I can hear my great grandmother talk about the atrocities of slavery, and that still impacts African Americans even to this day. And so when we look at trauma, and mostly in my work, especially looking at what we're going through adults, a lot of it comes from our childhood brokenness that we have not addressed. And so what Frederick Douglass said something that's very powerful. It still has a lot to do with my work when it says it's far easier to build strong children than to repair broken men. That is heavy, right? Because a lot of times when we're dealing with psychological, psychiatric stuff, that goes way back to abuse, maltreatment, from sexual to verbal to emotional to poverty. We still don't talk a lot about, I'm coming from the hood of Flint. So I know what that looks like. And seeing a lot of my homies that I went to school with are either in prison or dead, that still traumatized me and impacted my brain in such a way. And so a lot of times, especially when it comes to Black kids, they're not learning because they're stupid and ignorant. It's just the fact that they don't have a platform where they can be humanized and they can address their pain and brokenness. And so it impacts cognition. It impairs learning and retaining information. And the interior cortex of the brain that regulates emotion is the reason why you have behavior issues. So I always tell professionals in school, you can pour $1 million in tutoring programs, you can pour millions of dollars into social and emotional learning programs, but until you deal with trauma, you will never, or another way I say it like this, you will never impact how kids learn until you first address how people feel.
So and that's so dope. That's a dope pin to put right there, because when you talk about dealing with trauma, a lot of us have experienced trauma as children. right?
Yep.
And some of it is generational trauma.
Mm-hmm.
And
right.
so what I mean about generational trauma, y'all see, I came to have a conversation on tonight. I know y'all like, what? Because I didn't give them my notes. They don't even know how I'm coming. But I came ready to have a conversation. But I want to talk about that generational trauma.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times in the I'm talking about the African Americans because I'm Black. I can't talk about nobody else.
Right.
Yeah.
A lot of times within our community, we see that there's been a lot of molestation.
That's right.
That has went on for generations.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
And we sweep it up under the rug, like and allow for the offender to still be around other children within the family. Well, let's talk about that generational trauma, because I think that that's the root to us as individuals, things that we've experienced as children. And it's so important that we're able to acknowledge it, and not only acknowledge it, but call it out so that we can deal with it, so that we won't be broken ass adults, but whole and healed.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you don't mind, I'll take it and then.
Go ahead. Yes, most definitely.
So let's talk about the different types of trauma, because generation is a type.
Okay.
So again, define trauma as being a wound to the brain. A lot of our brains have been scarred because of a lot of things we have went through, right? And then we're dealing with this chronic stress, and we define it as a stress that supersedes your ability to cope with it. So when life-altering things happen in our lives, we start dealing with this stress that is so overwhelming. We have a difficult time coping with it, which triggers issues like mental illness, where we need to be seeing a therapist and having a whole nother discussion about removing the stigma that comes with getting mental health is a big issue.
But we get into that part.
Okay, so let's talk about the types of trauma. So one is acute trauma. Acute trauma is a one-time event that has long-term ramifications. So as what my sister had just talked about, a bad accident or natural disaster, that would become under the parameters of acute trauma. It happened one time, but you still having difficulties addressing it. You're still getting triggers. You're still reliving some of those episodes. Secondly, is chronic trauma. Chronic trauma is more of a long-term trauma over like 2 months. I would say something like poverty and abuse can come under the parameters of chronic trauma. Then another one is complex trauma, is when people are going through a plethora of many different traumas. For example, someone's been living in poverty for most of their life. They've been abused. Their father is in prison, so there's separation of family, exposure to violence. You know, you've seen a lot of your homies get killed, get carjacked, get shot, all of that. That all impacts the brain. Then another one is generational trauma, where generations, what my great grandmother went through, my grandmother endured it. When my grandmother through it, then my mother didn't do it, and then what the mother went through, then the daughter is going through it, and we failed to break a lot of those generational cycles. Again, that can be abuse, because a lot of times when we are working with kids that have been abused, it's like you do a trail, you're like, my grandmama went through the exact same thing. So that would be a generation. But another one, let's not forget about historical trauma. And historical trauma.
Wait, Dr. Holt. Hold on now. Because I'm still taking notes.
Okay.
See, Dr. Holt and I go way back from 7th grade.
Yeah.
This is my brother. So I'm still taking notes, right?
Okay.
So we went from acute, which is a one-time experience, maybe like a car accident. I'm just going down the list so I can make sure I'm keeping up.
That's right.
Then we went from acute to trauma, which is common, right?
Mm-hmm.
From trauma, we went to complex, correct?
So you're acute, chronic. Long-term traumas. It's just not this short thing that happened. Some people are living through a chronic trauma that if it's past 2 months, we start moving more into that chronic area.
Mm-hmm.
And then the complex is when one person is experiencing multifacets of trauma all at the same time, or for a nice long period of their life. Okay. And then we get into the generational trauma, which traumas supersede generations. Okay. It supersedes lifespans and going to the next generation.
Right.
And then we have historical
things like poverty.
Poverty is a big one, right?
And so molestation.
Molestation is a big generational trauma.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
then the historical trauma, and how I work with it and explain it and teach it, is historical trauma is not just generational, but it's also identified in certain marginalized and disenfranchised people's identifications. For example, when I look at the Holocaust, that would be historical trauma for Jews. When I look at border issues, when I look at detention centers, that would be historical traumas that's related to the Hispanic and Latino community. When I think about chattel slavery back to 1619, dealing with slavery, dealing with Jim Crow, dealing with segregation, dealing with redlining, dealing with discrimination, dealing with mass incarceration, racial profiling, school to prison pipeline. All of those things come under the historical traumas that Black people go through. So I just want to share some time for my sister. But I'm just
no, because I was about to pull Tracy in. Listen, let me tell you, Dr. Holt, you flow, and I'm gonna control the conversation. I got us.
Okay.
I got us, D. I got us, King. So Tracy.
Well, I'm sorry. I just wanted
because I was gonna just tag you in.
Oh, okay. No, and I for my end, I think what is very important when I see clients that are coming into therapy, maybe for the first time or something, and I'm doing a psychosocial assessment. And a psychosocial assessment to me is almost like the pathology. I'm tracing back. I'm trying to see when behavior started to begin and things like that, so I can treat them. A lot of them don't even know that what they experienced was trauma.
Right.
A lot of them don't even understand that was a very traumatic experience you went through.
That's good. Stay right there, though. Stay right there. Because I think you just hit the damn nail on the head. We are in such a state of denial, that we can't even realize when we've been in a traumatic situation.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
We've been programmed to just take a licking and keep on ticking, to just pray about stuff and to get over it. So I just had to say that because that was such a profound moment for this conversation.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times we cannot say, well, damn, what I just experienced was traumatic.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Why is that?
Do you want to? I think because especially within our community, trauma is not talked about. I think that everything is kind of like you said, it's a void. It's
good. This conversation good.
It isn't something that's kind of really brought to the forefront of like, well, wait a minute, would this be trauma? A lot of times if I'm working with a person who is suffering from addiction and I'm talking to them and they tell me about a traumatic experience that happened, and then I say, tell me when your addiction started. And then they're like, it started, it got worse. Like I just started using all the time, and then trying to help them connect that you learned how to cope. This was a traumatic experience, and this is what you did in order to help cope with what was going on with you. A lot of people don't understand what trauma is, and we don't have these conversations in our community. We don't talk about, hey, that's not supposed to happen. That was supposed to happen to you.
Right.
And the way that you respond to it is okay from what you know. That is how you coped with it. So we don't have these conversations. So then people don't know that, hey, that's a traumatic experience and I'm acting out on that. And I'm still 40 years old, still trying to get through and still trying to get over what had happened to me when I was 5. They don't understand that because it's not something that has been really talked about in our community.
Well, I think it's one of the reasons, and please feel free to chime in, because again, I am not the professionals, but my people are. That's why they're here. So we're going to have this conversation. One of the reasons why I think that we don't talk about things that we've experienced is due to shame, right? Or being told, okay, so like me, let's talk about me because I can't talk about anybody else. Growing up in church, I was always taught to pray about it, right? And let me give my disclaimer, because y'all know when I say stuff, people just run with it. This is not Tyra Hill bashing the church. This is Tyra Hill speaking her truth and her experience. And so you grow up in church, you go to church, you do everything you're supposed to, but down the road, you're going to experience a no good man, right? Down the road, you're going to experience some betrayal, right? Down the road, you're just going to experience some stuff. So they'll tell you to pray about it, give it to God and leave it there. But it wasn't until I realized that I needed help mentally, because I would get so angry and so violent. And I had to get to the root of why. I was nasty. And Dr. Holt will tell you, I would fight you, your mama, your daddy, everybody else. I was a really, really mean, angry, bitter, broken person.
Yeah.
And I had to do the work because I didn't like being that way. It wasn't who I was. It was what I had experienced. And what I mean by that is being the daughter of an affair, being a daddyless daughter, or feeling like you was the oops baby or the mistake.
Right.
Right? You really ain't got no birthright because you ain't supposed to be here. And then, so because you ain't really got no birthright, you ain't supposed to be here, you going to start doing all the right things with the wrong men. Right?
Yeah.
And so when the men or the sex stops making you feel good, then you're going to turn to drugs, right? And so those were some of the things that I experienced while being a member of a church.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
Yeah.
And so once again, I'm not knocking the church. I'm just saying, so I understood later in life that faith without works is dead, and I had to do the work, which meant I had to sit down, talk to somebody professional, not my pastor.
Yeah.
Because my pastor ain't licensed.
Right.
You get what I'm saying? Not my pastor, not my first lady, because they got issues and trauma that they dealing with too.
Yes.
But I had to sit down with a specialist who would, one, help me navigate through all of the hell and torture and trauma in my life. Oh, and being molested. You get what I'm saying? So it was just so many layers of trauma to where nothing spilled over but the anger.
Yes.
Yeah. So let me jump in there. So first of all, the body of Christ, as known as the church, is ill-equipped to deal with mental health and trauma in the first place.
Aren't you a pastor?
Yes, I am.
Okay, well, Pastor Holt said it. Well, Dr. Reverend Pastor Holt said it. Tyra Hill didn't say it. I was waiting to say I said something.
The fact of the matter is you said something that goes to one of my big statements in the work on trauma, and that is if you don't heal from your trauma, you will bleed over people that did not cut you. And that happens a lot of times is we are bleeding on people that didn't cut us because of the fact that we have not been able to address the traumas in our life. So let me go back a little bit. So we talk about trauma and mental health. There's two things, especially in the Black church and the Black congregation. Trauma is viewed as weakness, number one. And then mental health is looked at as insane and crazy. So when we talk about mental health, what's the first thing we do? We think about crisis centers. We think about straitjackets. We think about electric shock therapy. I mean, we think about some of the craziest extremes. And so we run away from these things is because if I label myself as getting mental health, then something is wrong with me, right? And then when we talk about trauma is considered as a weakness, right? Because you're like, that ain't trauma. That's just me being strong. That ain't trauma. We don't talk about, we got whatever goes in this house stays in this house. We have deep, dark secrets. We got skeletons and bones all over the place. You're wondering why we have so many of our Black kids, our Black youth and Black adults that are having some of the issues that they're having is because one, these deep, dark secrets that families have is exacerbating the problem. So that also creates people to be abused longer than what they should. Then, because the secrets, we will put a victim in the same space as the perpetrator that did it. So the uncle, the granddaddy, and the aunties that's been violating our nephews and our daughters, we still put them in same spaces of the abuser, which we talk about re-traumatization, which is another trauma, secondary trauma. And so with all of these different
well, it's not to cut you off, Dr. D, but it's you're experiencing re-trauma every time you're in the same building as your offender.
That's right.
your
Yeah.
molester.
Yes. Most.
Yes.
Yep.
Heck, yes. And we wondering why kids, this is the reason why, because of the trauma. And then another thing about trauma they talk about is that trauma rewires the brain. This is the reason why we have people that's been in trauma, where you got young ladies that's been violated, so they're promiscuous. Oh, she's a hoe. No, she's not a hoe. She's been wounded. And
Mhm.
nobody wants to talk about the wound and the scar and
The
root of the issue.
Right.
Right? So, and then you also have to watch out on the other side, and I'm not knocking my counterparts, but, I'm just going to say it. We don't need to rush in giving people antidepressants and putting them on medications and altering their brain chemistry. We need to really first peel the layers of the trauma, as what my sister said, doing some trauma assessment and pathologizing and figuring out where's the cause, so we can figure out what stages of treatment should be.
Yeah, and I want to say, and I just want to piggyback, because Dr. Hall, I think what you said is very important. And I'm going to say this also with some of the schools that I go into, and I'll even say of an experience I went in with a young girl who I was called by her mother because they wanted to label her as ADHD because she had started acting out in school. So I get this call and she's like, "I need you to come to this meeting with me, please." And and I'm like, sure, I'll go to an IEP meeting. That doesn't bother me. We need therapists in the IEP meetings anyway. So I'm like, yeah, sure. And as we're going, they're talking, they're like, oh, she's all these wild behaviors that she's doing. I'm like, but no one is sitting here addressing that last week her father was killed in front of her. And maybe that is why her behavior is what it is.
But you see what I'm saying? They don't never want to deal with our roots.
Right. We didn't see this 2 years ago. We're seeing this right now. Right. And what happened is we don't dig deep enough. So it's easy. Let's put them on ADHD and then let's put them on medication. That's not going to solve the problem. That's right. We have to get down to what is really actually going on with that child, with that adult, with that teenager, with those families, in order to actually help them heal. Exactly. And a lot of times that is not happening.
Yeah. And that is so important, because I suffer from severe anxiety, right? Mm-hmm. Like any moment I could have an anxiety attack and my whole world is turned upside down. And so it took me becoming my biggest advocate for me to find the right medication that was right for me, because they kept like giving me stuff and it didn't set well with me. I remember my first medication that they gave me, it had me literally like a zombie. I wouldn't even come out my bedroom.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, hell no, this ain't me. This not who I am. Even my speech was slurred. And I'm not in no way, shape, form, or fashion downplaying medication, because I'm sure we have viewers that's tuned in that's on medication. Yeah. What I'm saying is, be your biggest advocate. Just don't let them put you on anything. Do the footwork, research it, see what the side effects are, see what can you counterpart it with on a natural level, or even on a meditational level. Yeah. And once again, I am not a doctor or a physician. These are just my personal experiences. But on a serious note, I hate to see our children medicated to where they can't be children. They look like zombies. Mm-hmm. Even some of our adults.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we're rushing to give kids disorders. I've make it so, well, I can't learn. I have a learning disorder. No, there's nothing wrong with you, right? We need to go back to seeing what has happened to you. And one of the things that I teach in trauma is your approach. Approach is big, right? So instead of saying what's wrong with you, we want to figure out what has happened to you. And again, I'm not saying that there's not legitimate cases of mental illnesses and psychiatric situations, because they are. All I'm saying is that, make no mistake, big pharma is a multi-billion-dollar industry, and all it is want practitioners and physicians to throw pills out instead of really slowing down, peeling the layers of the onion and figuring out what in the world is going on with it. Yeah. I experienced the same thing as what you talk about, sis, when I had a young lady, I was called in, and young African-American young lady, I think she's 14, 15, very, very smart young lady, just angry, just pissed off at the world. And no one can work with her. They threw the social worker and they threw the school psychologist at her. So we're like, you got to see Dr. Holt. When it gets to the worst, you got to see Dr. Holt. And just sitting down talking with her, I got intel information. The reason why she was angry is, number one, she was raped. Number two, she was sleeping in the car because her mother couldn't afford any place to stay. I'm thinking like, okay, before you do all of these other things, this was telltale information for you to know that, number one, she's sleeping in a car. So poverty is an issue.
Yep.
Homelessness is an issue, right? And she's been sexually assaulted. And the student that assaulted her, she go to school with. So again, you're putting the victim in the same space of her.
Re-traumatizing her.
That's exactly right.
Exactly.
Well, I want to talk about the disparity that we're seeing within the African American community, especially since COVID-19, the pandemic has hit, right?
Yeah.
I live in a Caucasian little town, and I have been able to find Lysol, wipes, toilet paper, but when I'm in the urban communities, I can't find anything. I literally travel with when I'm traveling, I literally take my cleaning stuff with me, and I'm shipping people care packages.
Yeah.
There's such a disparity in the African American community, and even with the mental health. And because I'm about to go somewhere, let me see if y'all ready for this, because I know y'all are. This is such a dope conversation. Disparity within not just the crisis, the COVID-19 crisis, but thinking even now about the opiate crisis, right? Now it's health. But back in the 90s, when our grandparents, mamas, daddies, cousins, uncles, aunts, and everybody else was on crack, it was criminal. And so I'm seeing disparity on so many levels, because even out in my neck of the woods, it's probably like 4 methadone clinics.
Yeah.
And I'm like, but you sent our people to prison for years, and you're sending them to the clinic to get high so they can stop getting high. Can we just talk about that for a minute? The disparity within the medical, even with COVID-19, Black people being turned away because of their insurance or the lack thereof, or you don't have the right symptoms. There is a major disparity disparity demon that is lurking in the African American community, and our people are hurting, and it's like nothing we can really do about it.
I'll let my sis go, and then I come.
I'm going to be but Tracy, like, let me just say this. Tracy is my therapist. So Tracy is used to me, because when we have our moments, I be boo-hooing, I be crying, and Tracy just be like, okay, Tyra, breathe. Okay, Tracy, go ahead. You got it.
What I can say is, wow, what can I say about that? I mean, this is something that has been going on for years and years. And it's a part of that systematic racism that nobody wants to talk about. Of course, if you talk, it doesn't exist, right? So this is the thing. I don't even know where to begin, because this is something that they have done over years, where they have set up communities. They put Black people in these communities, and they took all resources away from them. And then they were like, hey, let's see if you can survive.
Let's talk about it. Talk about them resources, Queen. Let's talk about it.
And let's see if you will be able to survive. And then, you put things in those communities in order to make sure that those people have a more difficult time of surviving. If we want to look at drugs and other things like that. I mean, this is something that has been going on for years, and especially medically when we look at it. I mean, the number one death among Black women still is childbirth. So we're still seeing Black women dying at large numbers from childbirth. This is something that, there's a organization in Baltimore City that is addressing that. because that is such a big thing that Black women are still dying from childbirth and not getting the health care that they need. So this is not something that is just we're seeing now. This is something that has always been happening when we talk about, and this is part of that systemic racism where it's like, give them the bare minimum, take away everything that they need. And I'm going to say this even so when I look at it from the mental health perspective, and I'm going to be very honest, the communities, most of my low income communities do not get mental health services. When I started doing mental health, that's where I started. I started in those areas, and I started working for what is called outpatient mental health clinics. Now, don't get me wrong, they are needed, but at the same time, my Black people are not getting the same type of treatment as if they were in other areas within this
the
country.
suburbs.
Right. So when I came out of doing OMHC and started to go into private practice, the reason I did that is because I wanted to make sure that my community was getting the same treatment that I would give if I was to see my white clients or clients of any other ethnicity or race. And they deserve good therapy, good treatment. But that's not always happening. So it is this thing that has been, I mean, and Dr. Holt, you can jump in. It's this thing that has been for a very, very, very long time. I don't know when this thing will turn around. I don't. There's a lot of people that are working to help with these disparities. There's a lot of people that
organizations,
but we still have a long way to go.
Yeah.
Well, Dr. Holt, go ahead, because I wanted to go ahead.
No, I was just about to allude to our issue is really, really deep, and it goes back 400 years ago. After they emancipated slaves, they didn't give us land, and we didn't get a head start. We helped build this nation to be one of the most powerful economies in the world, and yet we're still some of the most poor individuals in our nation, and we helped build one of the richest countries, and we're off the back of free laborless slavery. So this goes way back. So what I want to talk about is the deeper part of when we talk about racism. Racism is more than a racial slur. It's bigger than this ideology of not liking people because of the color of their skin. I think that's a lot of times that we limit racism to that, but racism is more deeper. It is a system. It is a structure, and it's an institution, and it is systemically. We don't have a broken system. You're lying if that's what you think it is. It is on purpose to marginalize a particular people and disenfranchise them for generations. And this is the reason why Black people, Black folks, African Americans in this country, there's a big wealth gap by 10 points versus our white counterparts, because racism is so systemic. It impacts our education system. We still have the poor funded schools, our achievement rates, our graduation rate. I'm just talking about education. I'm not talking about criminal justice. Overpopulate Black and brown people. We incarcerate more people in this nation than any country in the world. And the big end of the stick is African Americans and Latinos that's in the prison system. Then we label them as a felony, and by the time they come out, they can't get jobs, they can't get housing.
They just disenfranchised all the way around. Can't get housing, can't get no type of grant to go back to school to do nothing with themselves. Just can't. And you're absolutely correct, sir, when you say that it is not a broken system. It was and has always been a premeditated system.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, I want to talk about real quick the social injustice that we're experiencing.
Okay.
Before we went live on air, there was a private conversation, and I so loved you all's conversation. It made my heart smile, because bringing this conversation together and bringing two dope ass professionals, mental health professionals together who don't know each other. I'm never worried about bringing guests on the show, because I know everybody's gonna act right? But just listening to the behind the scenes conversation with you both, you started talking about the young men. The young men are really having a hard time.
Yeah.
Can we talk about that?
Yeah, so and our young men are having a hard time because our black boys are having a hard time,
Yeah.
right? I have to have a conversation with my son about, okay, when you get pulled over by the police, this is what you need to do. If you have tinted windows, you need to roll all four of your windows down so that officer do not feel threatened and have any kind of reason to pull his firearm out of his holster, because you getting smart with an officer or appearing to be defiant or aggressive can be deadly. Okay.
Yeah.
So and then two, when we talk about race, is that African American boys, the darker the skin, the more of a threat. White society see kids. I mean, a kid can be 13 years old and we automatically, what we're seeing with educators is viewing them as an adult. He can be 13 years old and be 6'1", and we have white educators extremely intimidated just because of their dark black skin. And we've seen where our skin can weaponize our law enforcement. We have white people that say, they're going to believe me over you, so I'm going to call 911
Oh,
and
we
say,
seen it with the
yeah,
Karens and the Kens, honey.
yeah,
We
exactly.
seen
So
it.
yeah, and
And they use their tears to weaponize.
they weaponize our black
Mhm.
men. But again, this is also, when we talk about trauma, this is historical, this is
Mhm.
generational. And
Mhm.
then don't add either poverty or add a felony to our black men, and it just really creates this deep, dark, chronic issue in our black community. Number one, our black men, what they have a felony that's hard for them to get work. Then it
Absolutely.
impacts recidivism. They go back into prison, and then that becomes a vicious cycle. Then another thing I want to point, and I'll hand it over to my sister, is when we talk about black men, is that they are the role model for our sons and our daughters. Um,
Mhm.
Sons need their fathers, daughters need their daddies. I don't care what nobody say. I look at the science, and
Absolutely.
Oh yeah, most definitely.
so many
Absolutely.
issues when the black man is not there. The reason why a lot of our young ladies are looking at hip hop artists to be their role models is because a lot of times those daddies are not there, those fathers are not there, and they're not healthy relationships. Because the first impression of a young daughter of what a real father is and a real man is comes from her father. He is the one to show the way and build that relationship and set the standard. So when she looks into date, she's looking to have a serious relationship or a husband, he should be that standard. And when that structure is not in place, and then because we're not in place, we add this 70% of single black mothers in the nation. That is crazy.
Well,
But
I was just
oh,
about to go there, Dr. Ho. Hold on now, because you talking good, my brother. Come on, King. Let's talk about it. But you're absolutely right, because I was a daddyless daughter, the first Negro that told me he loved me and that I was pretty, he became my dad.
Yeah.
Maybe
Yeah.
Zaddy. You see
Yeah.
what I'm saying?
Mhm.
So you're absolutely right. Men need to understand and realize that they are their daughter's first love.
Yes.
The first time a girl should hear that she's beautiful, it should come from her father.
It is.
The
Yep.
first time a father should take his daughter on a date to show her what to expect. You get what I'm saying? It's just things that you learn, right? But I'm going somewhere with this. But even with me, because I didn't have that, that was part of my trauma, and I had to figure
Mhm.
out how to forgive my daddy.
yeah.
Because looking in the mirror, we might have a part two to this, I don't know. Looking in the mirror, how do you look in the mirror and hate half of who you are?
Mhm.
Because you can't stand your daddy or your mama. And so I had to work through all of that and do the work. But I want to come back to something you said. Because as I said it before, she's taking notes. Baby mama. You said here, I hate the term, but I have to say it like that. You sat here and you said how young men and young girls need their fathers.
That's right.
It is extremely traumatic to try to remove the father from a child's life because of a way that you may feel about him. And what I mean by this is he might have been a horrible ass husband and a horrible ass boyfriend, but that does not mean that he will be a horrible father.
Most definitely. And most definitely. And I think that's a lot of times, I do have to have those conversations sometimes where I'm like, at this point, when you decide to have a child, it stopped being about you. And at this point, what you two went through, that is what you two went through. You need to keep it there, but that should not affect the child, because the child needs their father just like the child needs their mother. So at this
how
point,
do you break down? And this is where the breakdown for me comes. You cannot remove the father figure role from the family dynamics, right?
mm-hmm.
There's no way that you can do it with thinking that you can have a healthy family. Now, I know somebody's probably watching saying, oh, I'm lesbian or I'm gay. I'm not talking about y'all right now.
Right.
I'm talking about the dynamics of the family. I'm not saying that you don't deserve to have your own family. I'm not saying that I don't love you or nothing. What I'm talking about is looking in the African American community and seeing the absent fathers.
Yes.
And how our sons and daughters are being reared. And they're being reared broken. Right. See, I have to be clear on who I'm talking to, because like I said, I say something, people take it and run with it. So I have to say, I ain't talking about you right now. Right now, what I'm talking about is no more broken children. Yeah. How do we heal our children?
Well, we have to go back to, and I know it's a tough discussion. I think this is a part 2, but at the end of the day, racism and all these things that we're dealing with in trauma. But the fact of the matter is, we do not have enough conversation about the Black family. We have to own that.
Yeah,
we have to own that, because we are creating a vicious cycle of young men that think it's swag, to get women pregnant, don't take care of them, or have sex. Kids all over the place and not doing what you're supposed to do. No, you need to understand that it is important for family structure to have a 2-parent household. The data is behind it. The science is behind it. The self-esteem is there. The self-efficacy is there. And we see all this risky behavior that we are all throwing on schools, and they are ill-equipped to handle that. They are the institution of learning, and they need to focus on creating
education.
But we're throwing everything because the family dynamic is deteriorating, and it is looking so different. I mean, from 30 years ago to today, the family structure has most definitely shifted, and we are seeing overwhelming 70% of our Black mothers working 2 and 3 jobs, trying to go to community college, to one, take care, keep the lights on, take care of them. And a lot of our dads are not there. Now, I know that's a complex situation. There's a lot of other dynamics that play with that, relationship issues. I'm big on mothers not, and they do that too. They weaponize child support. And I believe fathers need to take care of their children, but you got mothers out there to be like, well, we can't be together. And I don't like the fact you with somebody else, so you ain't seeing your kids.
That's a bitter baby mama.
And I'm gonna weaponize child support to take all your money.
Right there.
But I do want to add this, because I do think sometimes in having that conversation, we do need to acknowledge that certain things that recently, within 2018, CDC and the Pew Research did come out with research stating that Black fathers are in the homes, and that the family structure has changed, and that Black men, what they have shown, out of all races, do spend the most time with their children. But but what was not taken into consideration is, like Dr. Holt said, the structure right, of the family has changed. So then that has to be talked about, because now what we're seeing is that what is also said, most Black women are not married. Right. So these fathers are still involved, but they're not married. So they're not traditional.
Let's think about it. Back in our mama day, or our grandmama's day, when Mr. Bill pulled up, honey. Mr. Bill pulled up with some groceries, honey, and some rent money, honey. And Mr. Bill spent time with the kids.
Right.
So when we talk about the structure, some of the structure that I would like to see back into the Black families, right, is eating dinner together at the dinner table. I think that's important. And here's why. That's the time for you to get into your children's business.
That's right.
What's going on with them? How is school? What teachers you rocking with? What teachers you don't like? Who talking shit to you? Who bullying you? You get what I'm saying? That's the time to have those conversations, and even to see how you need to pray for your children.
Yeah.
Right? That's strategy, or even with your spouse and your children. You sit down and you commune as a family. But the problem that I have, and I think the reason why the family dynamics has been broken, I need my computer charger, why the family dynamics has been broken so much, I can't believe that just happened, it was on 100%. Why it's been broken so much, it should be right there, is because you have the ego and the pride. The ego of the pride of not wanting to say that I can't do this by myself. You get what I'm saying? The village is missing. That's what I'm trying to say. Where is the village? It used to be a village. So if somebody on the block was hungry, we all made sure that they ate. You get what I'm saying? Even with the virtual learning. Like for me, I don't want to be nobody's teacher. As a matter of fact, I told baby, Nana's not being your teacher. I'm the principal. That means when you act up, they call me, I pull up, right? I'm the principal. But it's days that I've had, or his grandfather has had to be the teacher's aide because his mom has had to do something. And I don't mind, because where's the village? We're the village. And until we get back to communing or being the community and communing with each other and understanding we're stronger together than we are apart. You know, I just think with us as a community, I think about how we spend our money reckless. Why is it that name, brand, and fashion is all some of us think about? We don't think about the life insurance. We do the GoFundMes. I'm going to talk about it tonight. I know it's going to be some people that's mad, but we're going to talk about it tonight. We do the GoFundMes. We don't set college tuition to the side for our children. There is no generational wealth being stored for our children. And so this is why we can't get out of being impoverished, because nobody has really taught us how to. And then now that we grown, you really can't tell grown people nothing.
Yeah, you going back all the way to comprehensive education, right? Saying education and viewing comprehensive education. I mean, even going to talking about a robust, comprehensive early childhood education, especially for young Black students, where we can stimulate the brain and give them a great head start. So by the time they get to the third grade, their math and reading skills are off the chart. Because a lot of times we don't talk about that is one of the benchmarks that a lot of private prisons and investors look at, that when a lot of kids are failing in their math and reading skills by the third grade, this is how they know how to build more prisons. And this is what we have the school to prison pipeline type of conversation. But that's a whole nother conversation. But what I want to focus on is comprehensive education, to where, especially with Black students, that they are getting the right type of education and skills that they need before they graduate. Let's talk about credit. What is the FICO score at 7th grade? We need to be having those kind of conversations. Teaching kids that when they get an allowance, teaching them getting an account. Instead, and our young Black adults, when you get your refund, buy some stocks, not Red Lobster, okay?
Or Rams.
Yeah,
or an ounce of weed. You see what I'm saying? Or
it's a mindset shift on priorities. And now as a pastor, I can tell you, I'm tired of trying to bury people and scramble, get up money so they can put a plot on their cemetery. Are you kidding me? Or to have the gas station raise funds to be able to cremate
or to sell dinners.
Sell dinners. These are.
But that's trauma.
It is
trauma.
It is trauma.
Let me tell you something, and I don't mean no harm, because I understand who much is given, much is required.
That's right.
I ain't burying nobody in my family, and you know why? They're gonna go out in a pine box, and I tell them all the time, I'm not, because see, here's the thing. If you can't take, and you know I'm still crazy.
I'm praying for you.
If you can't take, $25 up out of your monthly or bi-weekly or weekly. However you getting your money. And you can go get your hair and your nails did every week and be fly.
Yeah.
Oh, baby, you gonna burn, baby, burn.
Yeah.
I'm just telling you, that's how it's going down. We have to start having these real conversations with our family members.
That's right.
When my grandchildren get of age, I want them to be okay. Yeah. I want them to own land. I want them to own property. I want them to have stocks. I've already started that. Yeah. But I want to talk about this, y'all. It's already been an hour. We're going over. Don't go nowhere. We're going to close it up. But this conversation is good. If this conversation is good, please share it. Somebody needs to hear this. I want to talk about the term black on black crime. I hate that term. I hate that term. And the reason why I hate that term is because there is Italian on Italian crime, Latino on Latino crime, Caucasian on Caucasian crime, but all we hear about is black on black crime.
Yeah.
However, I know that there is a lot of turmoil, excuse me, and blood within our community, right?
Yeah.
How do we expect people who have experienced trauma, and I'm going down, I'm just going to go down the list: acute trauma, common trauma, chronic trauma, complex trauma, generational trauma, historical trauma. How do we expect for those people to be productive citizens without giving them the resources that they need to be healthy mentally?
Mm-hmm.
We can't expect, and I want to talk about this. Like the other day in Baltimore, a young man murdered a bus driver in broad daylight. Crushed my heart, broke my heart. All I could think about was, I wonder what he's been through that would make him into a cold-blooded murderer. To murder somebody for nothing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I think that one, if the resources is you need more mental health services within these communities. This is the thing, and I'm going to be very honest, is that always see there's a thin line between perpetrator and victim. That line is very thin, and what people don't understand is that we don't have these resources in these communities, because one, and I'm going to say it, you will hear so much stuff when something happens. Oh, we're going to put more into mental health. We're going to put more money into mental health. You'll hear it up there. If there's a mass shooting, school shooting, or something like that, it's a mental health issue. We're going to put more money. That's not going. And I try to tell people that's never going to happen because mental health is too expensive. They're not going to put that money into these communities because it is too expensive. I have sat with different boards within Baltimore City. They brought me in. They want to have a consult or a clinical consultant. What are we going to do? I said, why are we sitting here having the conversation? You're not going to give us the money that we need in order to fix this problem. Right? Because you don't really want to do what is necessary in order to help people. You just don't, because it's not going to be cheap. It's going to be.
I don't think they take into consideration, though, Tracy and Dr. Holt, that even when I think about Flint and Baltimore, when I moved to Baltimore 18 years ago, I remember enrolling my son into school. He went to 64. I think that's Liberty. And the water fountains were crossed out. They couldn't even drink from the water fountains back then. It was lead in the schools. Mm-hmm. And then I think about Flint, right? 6 years later, Flint is still dealing with it. I don't think they take in things that we or our children experience, even living in lead-infested housing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, the fact of the matter is, this is what I meant when I talked about racism being more than a racial slur, this ideology. It's a structure, it's an institution, it's a system.
Yeah.
And the fact of the matter is, we have two different systems based on race. White folks, when they make a mistake, they get mental health.
Yep.
And they get rehab.
They always,
we get prison. Yeah, we get prison. Make no mistake. And when you think about Baltimore, Flint, Chicago, that they call now Chirac, when we talk about these solutions on black on black crime, again, it's criminalized, right? The funding goes to the justice system. It doesn't goes to mental health. It doesn't goes to affordable housing. It doesn't goes to access to quality health care. Saying that we want to give you health care and having access to quality health care is two different type of conversations. It is constantly looking different for black and white people. So the system is not fair. It is designed, again, I'm talking about, this is not no broken system. It is designed to redline our neighborhoods. You know, this also has a lot to do with black business. Because if your business is in a red line type of zip code, you're not getting that business loan to get mom and pop shops up off the ground. We're not having these type of discussions, but it needs to be really talked about on how racism is so bigger than the N word. That's what I'm trying to tell you. It's
it's deep.
It is.
And it is to keep us. I go deeper than that. Racism is designed to marginalize my grandson that have not been born yet.
Yes, most definitely.
And we don't talk about that, but that 3 generations is designed that way. 3 generations from my generation.
And check it, you don't have grandsons, but I have 3.
Right.
So I have to do the work now.
Right.
Yeah, we have 2 different systems. And this is where I think we need to be talking about solutions. And this is a chess game. This ain't checkers. Okay. This is not about being emotional, being mad.
Art of war, honey.
And I'm a believer. You need to protest. You need to march. You need to do all those things. But the system know that in 2 or 3 weeks, y'all gonna come off them streets, and everything is gonna go back the same.
Exactly.
We need to be focusing on impacting policy, and we don't have those conversations enough. I'm mad, not just to protest, but I'm upset to where I'm going to impact policy. Well, how do you do that? Number one, black folks ain't sitting at the seat of the table where decisions are made.
Come on now.
Right. For my community, if you're not in the mayor's office, you're not a county board supervisor, you're not a city councilman, you're not a superintendent over education. We're not talking about, we're just talking about being mad and being emotional. And again, it has its place. It has its place.
King, I can only imagine Dr. King said, I said March, but I stopped now.
Yeah.
It's time to, we over it.
Yeah.
It's time to get up. It's time to have a seat at the table.
Dr. King gave us a template. He marched, he protested, but before he died, we got a Civil Rights Act. We impacted legislation. We impacted policy. So that's where we need to be, is getting this laser focus and picking some young black and women said, you're running for office. We're going to show you how to put a campaign together. We're going to show you how to do fundraising. We're going to show you how to be data driven. But this is a long chess game, right? This ain't just coming on overnight, but we have to at some point start doing strategic planning for black empowerment.
Well, we got to show up, like you said, show up to the board meetings, like Shay Greg said, show up to your school, church PTA meetings, show up to your community meetings. They're doing a project out here where I live at, right?
Yeah.
And the Caucasians mad. And they're mad because they've never experienced gentrification. But they're about to experience now, and I'm giggling, right? So I'm not voting no. I said, hey, you get what I'm saying? Because that's how they come into our neighborhoods, right?
Yep.
And so what we don't understand is we have to show up for those town hall meetings.
That's right.
Show up for those PTA meetings.
That's right.
Show up for those school board meetings.
And get on
city council.
Get on committees.
Get on committees.
It don't have to be an elected
volunteer.
Right.
Volunteer, yeah.
Volunteer, right. Exactly.
I want to see us at the polls as election judges.
Yeah.
I think if we were represented more at the polls, we would bypass the foolery. You get what I'm saying? But you never really see us represented at the polls.
Yeah.
But we have to show up more. We just can't be in the background talking a good game, murmuring and complaining, but ain't putting our money where our mouth is and not showing up for shit, right?
That's right.
That's right.
And so for me, I'm just so excited, Dr. Holt. I thank you. I love you. I want to ask you, because one of the viewers said that your class was dope. Tell us about your class.
So I have some things going on. So I designed a, trauma-informed virtual college course for Metropolitan State University of Denver. It's free. You can go to MSU of Denver and sign up, take my class. You even get a certificate of completion when you're done. I'm in the works of creating some more trauma informed and trauma responsiveness. I think that's where we need to get. A lot of us trying to get informed, but none of us have been responsive. So really getting people to be responsive in our approach to create healing in places where there's a lot of pain and brokenness. And so a lot of my work, a lot of people know, is in our education system. Another reason why I do this is because I'm a neuroscience expert that is Black, and I think that more kids need to see people that look like me, So when we got Black and brown kids that's really having a hard time, they need to see somebody that look like them that understand the struggle. I tell them I'm from Flint, Michigan, and before trauma was big, I didn't even know all the different traumas I was going.
You was in the trauma, honey.
But the resilience piece is what we're missing. And so under the Limits to Lemonade project, we, always say that trauma can be sour like lemons, but you can get some sugar and water and turn all of your sour experiences into lemonade. And, there's a resilience piece. You can bounce back. You just need to support, and self-care is a big thing. And it's like six different dynamics, from psychological self-care, spiritual self-care, emotional self-care, professional self-care, physical self-care, and getting a mental health support. Yes. And I think that I'm in a unique situation to bring healing from the spiritual side as a pastor.
Right.
As a traumatologist and trauma crisis specialist on the psychological side. And I'm also trying to work with the churches and pastors to say, look, you're
They need it. They need it.
Yeah.
They need it, because let me tell you, it's nothing worse than leading and bleeding at the same damn time.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Right.
It's nothing worse. And it's time for the church to heal, because when we have healthy churches, we have healthy communities. And when we have healthy communities, we have healthy families. You get what I'm saying? Yeah. So I love that. I want to say something about your virtual class.
Yes.
That you can take it at your own pace, right?
Yes, you can.
I wanted to say that.
Course, it's an introductory course.
Yeah, I know.
Okay.
So they keep telling me how they beat me in the class, right? And I'm in production. I'm like, y'all better not outdo me. But a few of the viewers have signed up, and they keep telling me, they email me and tell me how dope it is. Wow. So I wanted to commend you.
Yeah,
thank you. I didn't know that. So I appreciate the feedback. So I'm working on developing some extra stuff. My final thing is I'm working on kit where I do a trainer model. So instead of me coming in and doing all this training and everybody go back to doing the same stuff, now I'm anchoring a kit model that I designed as Dr. Holt branded, to where we're going to train practitioners to stay in the schools and help our kids heal so they can become something special in this world.
We can't have no more broken babies, because they are our future.
Yeah.
And we need them to be healed, and we need them to be whole.
Yeah.
Tracy, what do you have going on, baby doll? Where can the people listen? I want to ask both of you, because I got a whole bunch of people that my fans need therapy. And I had to tell somebody today, she was like, will you pray for me? Y'all know I'll pray for anybody.
Right.
But I had to explain to her, at some point, you got to do more than just ask for prayer. Find you a therapist. She lost her mom. Her heart is broken. She's devastated.
Yeah.
Right. Telling me, and one of the problems I had a hard time with was finding a good therapist to fit me.
Yeah. That's
personality.
Yeah.
It's important.
It is. And and that is part of the thing, is finding a good therapist to fit you and not having to tell your story over and over again, which also stops people from continuing on with therapy, because I don't want to keep telling my story over and over again. But the truth is, not every therapist is going to fit you or be that person that you feel like you can open up and be able to kind of have that working relationship with. So you might have to try a few. But what I always say about this is that when I'm
gonna take my daughter to the bathroom real quick. All right.
But what I always say is that when we look at health, and when I ask someone, are they healthy? They will usually say, yes, I'm healthy because maybe they work out or they eat right. Well, the truth of the matter is health is really a triangle, and you need to be physical, mentally, and spiritually healthy. And if any one of those components are missing, you're not healthy. So mental health is very important for everyone. It is not what people think. It does not mean that you're crazy. It does not mean that, oh, something's wrong. No, what it is, it gives you the space to talk about what's going on with you. It is about you. And it gives you that space to talk about what's going on with you, what's troubling you, with no judgment, to let it all out and to leave feeling better and to heal and to go through this process and come out on the other end healed and better to take on something else that might come, that might be troubling. But you have to do the work. And therapy is not easy.
It's not.
It's not going to be comfortable. It is hard work. And I have to explain that to people all the time. It is hard work. We're digging.
It ain't pretty. It's
not pretty, but it's okay. It's not.
But you know what? God gives you beauty for ashes.
Exactly.
Because you gotta let it burn, baby. You can't heal what you don't feel.
Right.
You get what I'm saying?
Yes.
You cannot heal what you don't feel. So sometimes you just gotta let that shit burn.
Yeah.
It is what it is. You have to face it head on and say, okay, this is where I am. But what I love about you is, because it takes a special kind of person to deal with Tyra Hill, right?
Mm-hmm.
And my strong personality. But I think from the beginning, I was just open to you because I felt that you cared. Mm-hmm. I saw that you cared. I mean, and I get so tickled because, you know, I hate calling you or having our session, and all I do is cry.
Crying good.
Oh, that's right. Oh, Tracy, let me tell y'all something. It be them ugly cries too.
Right.
And what I love about you is how you handle me and your patience with me. And you would just sit there. Sometimes you just need to hear people say, it's going to be okay. Let it out. Let it out. Because I think as Black people, we try to be strong. We don't like to feel. Mm-hmm. And you cannot heal what you don't feel. Exactly. You know, you tell people will tell you, oh, you got to be strong. Who said I got to be strong all the damn time?
Right. No.
I feel like being strong today.
Exactly. And you know, and that is exact. And I will say this: one, I wish I had more Black male therapists. That would be great because
I'm not the guy, Dr. Holt. I'm about to ask you about you taking any work.
That would absolutely be great. We have they're very slim. We're always searching for some, but also too, if Black men need to understand that it is okay, and they have to understand that when they come into therapy, you're going to feel. But I think a lot of times they think, well, Miss Tracy, you're trying to make me emotional. No, I'm just trying for you to get in touch with your feelings so that you can heal through this. You understand? And you have to be okay with that. You know, and it is hard. I want more of my Black men to get in therapy. I want more Black male therapists. All of these things so that they can also feel more supported in things like that. Also, it's not always easy for a Black man to come to a Black woman and spill out everything that has happened to them. And then want that. Sometimes they need a Black male therapist for that. But if I could just get more Black men into therapy, that would be amazing. That would be great because they need it too. They need someone to talk to too.
And I think that is so dope. Let me tell y'all something. We've been talking for 1 hour, 17 minutes, 18 minutes. And this show is usually an hour, but I did not want to rush this much needed and much anticipated conversation. Tracy, let the fans know where they can connect with you at. You're not really on social media that much, but you know, let them know where to connect with you at.
Well, usually you can just email me. So my email is just Harris, HARRIS, T as in Tom, D as in David, _80@hotmail.com. And usually if you email me, I will definitely try to connect you to a therapist in your area or work with you if I'm able to. You know, they have a lot of stipulation on where we can work and things like that. Because of our license, we have to be licensed in certain areas in different states to be able to work in those states. But I will definitely do my best to connect you to a therapist that I feel like will work with you or even to talk to you because there's so many different types of therapy. So also talking to you about, you know, do you need DBT, CBT, EMDR, talking to you about what might work best for you in order to help you with some of the issues that you're going through.
Dr. Holt, My homie, my brother, my friend. Let the fans know where they can connect with you at.
One of the big things is you can connect with my email. Put it in the chat room for them to see, DaMond at DaMondHolt.com. And most definitely you can reach out to me if you need your school districts that's having a difficult time understanding Black kids and discipline.
Bullying prevention.
Prevention, restorative practices. A lot of that is my work. So please feel free to reach out to me and let's talk. Let's help people heal.
Yep.
Ladies and gentlemen, it has been a trill conversation on the Queen's Wind Down. Tonight we talked about it. It was real. It was raw. Mental health, the state of the Black community. I would like to thank my two amazing guest co-hosts, Tracy Harris. Mwah,
Thank you.
mwah, mwah.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure. Thank
Oh,
you.
I'm so happy you chimed in, Tracy. Dr. DaMond Holt.
Yes.
I love you, King.
Bless
And on that note, we're going to say good night.
Good night. Thank
Good
you.
night, everybody.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Say bye.
Bye. Bye. It's a family affair. Yay.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you, Dr. Holt. Thank you.
Okay. Me and my girl, that's why we fix each other's wrong.